boys and girls, it's Miss Manning. Today we're working on Module 2, Lesson 2, where we're learning to estimate multi-digit products by rounding factors to a basic fact and then using our place value patterns. Now, estimating, especially with products, comes in handy. For me as an adult, it comes in handy every time I decide I need to go on a shopping spree and I'm sitting there looking in my cart and I'm trying to figure out not the exact price of how much I'm going to spend, but an estimate. So my best guess using rounded figures from what I'm purchasing. So I may have an item in my cart that's $27.99. Well, I'm going to round that up to 28 or $29 with tax and things like that. And then I can add those things mentally in my head, or I can multiply depending on how many I have. So much easier, so that way I don't walk up to the cash register and then all of a sudden go, oh my goodness, I spent $200, because that doesn't ever happen to me. But for us to be able to do that, the first thing that we're going to have to do with our numbers is we have to determine the best place value for you to round your factors to, because you have to keep in mind you want it to be rounded to a basic fact, something that you can multiply in your head. So you're going to have to play around with each number, and everybody is going to be different. That's the beauty of this lesson, is that I could round certain numbers to something that I could solve in my head, whereas my class or my students might be rounding it to different numbers. As long as they've done their multiplication correctly, they're fine. And then we're going to solve those problems using the distributive property. So for our application problem today, we have a story about, or a problem about Jonas, who practices guitar for 1 hour a day for 2 years. So 1 hour a day for not just 365 days, because that's 1 year, but for 2 years. And then we also have Bradley, who practices 2 hours a day more than Jonas. So not 1 hour, but 2 more hours, which gives him a total of 3 hours. And he does that not for 365 days, but twice as much as that. So how many more minutes does Bradley practice the guitar than Jonas over the course of 2 years? So we have to pay attention to the fact that they give us it in hours, but then they want the answer in minutes. And we want how many more. So that means that obviously Bradley's going to have more minutes than Jonas, but they want to know how many more. So first, we have to think about if he is practicing 1 hour for 365 days, he will practice a total of 365 hours. And that's just going to be 1 year. So if we double that, or make 2 copies of it, that's going to give how many hours he practices in 2 years. So 365 times 2, 5 times 2 is 10, carry the 1. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 1, 13, carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So he is going to practice 730 hours. Now we need to know that in minutes. So if we're converting from hours to minutes, 1 hour is going to equal 60 minutes. So we've got to make copies of these. Each one of these hours, we've got to make a copy of 60. So we've got to multiply it by 60. So what we can actually do, if we did 0 times 0, 0 times 3, 0 times 7, we would get 0. So we're going to skip that step and go on to this placeholder 0, or I'm sorry, to our tens place. So we put a 0 here. So 0 times 6 is 0. 6 times 3 is 18. Carry the 1. 7 times 6, 42, 43. So we end up with 43,800 minutes. Now we've got to go over to Bradley. Now Bradley practices 3 hours in 1 year, or a day for 1 year. So let's figure that out. 1 year, 365 days. He practices 3 hours every day. So 5 times 3 is 15. 6 times 3, 18, 19. Carry the 1. 3 times 3 is 9, plus 1, 10. Now that's just 1 year. He does that for 2 years. So we've got to double that. 5 times 2 is 10. 9 times 2 is 18, 19. Carry the 1. 0 times 2 is 0, plus 1. 1 times 2 is 2. So that's how many hours he practices, but we want to know it in minutes. So we have to take these 2,190 hours and make 60 copies because every hour is 60 minutes. So again, 0, 0, 0, 0. So we're going to skip that first step, that 0. We're going to put our placeholder 0 because we're multiplying by the tens. So we have 6 times 0, which is 0. 9 times 6, which is 54. 1 times 6 plus 1 more, or plus 5 more, I'm sorry, is 11. And then 2 times 6 is 12, plus 1 more, 13. So he is practicing 131,400 minutes. But the question is, how many more minutes did he practice? So now we get into the next step of our problem. Welcome to 5th grade, by the way. 131,400, and we want to find out how many more he practiced. So we're going to subtract his 43,800. So we're starting in the ones place, 0, tens place, 0. Well, then when we get to the hundreds, we have 4 minus 8 we can't do, so we're going to borrow from our thousands place. Give over here, 14 minus 8 is 6. Then we have 0 minus 3, we've got to go over here and borrow. So now I have 10 minus 3, which is 7. Now I have 2 minus 4, I can't do, so I need to borrow. So now I have 12 minus 4, which is 8. So Bradley practices 87,600 more minutes than Jonas. So for our problems today, remember that first step says to find whatever number you can round it to easiest. So if I asked you to round this one to the nearest 10, this problem to the nearest 10, if we looked at 456 on our number line for rounding, 450 would be here, 460 would be here, and 455 would be here. And it would round up to 460 and 42. If I were to put that on a number line, if I asked you to round to the nearest 10, we would have 40, 50, and our midpoint would be 45. Well, 42 is below that, so it would round down to 40. So I personally can't take 460 times 40 in my head. Also, remember, we're looking for a basic fact. 46 and 4 is not a basic fact. So that's not what we're going to want to round it to. So we're going to want to round up to the hundreds place. So for our number line, we would have 400 here. The top of our number line would be, 500. And our midpoint would be 450. And we can't round this one to the 100, so we would round it to the tens place, the biggest value we can, which would still be 40. So 456 is obviously bigger than 450, so we're going to round up to 500. So when we write it in unit form, that's where we're really going to see our basic fact. So we have 5 hundreds and we have 4 tens. So we can take our 5 times our 4 to get 20, and we would take our hundreds times tens, which would be thousands. Or we could multiply our basic fact up here, which was 20, and then we could count our zeros, which would be 3 zeros that we would need to add. 1, 2, 3. So if you notice, a common mistake that you would see, that I've seen kids make, is take 4 times 5 and get 20 and then add 3 zeros, 1, 2, 3. There's a big difference between 2,000 and 20,000. If somebody owed me $20,000, I would not be willing to accept 2,000. That's much less. So don't accept less from your products when you're multiplying. If your basic fact ends in a 0, make sure you don't count that 0 when you're counting the zeros that you're going to add to the end of it. So in this case, I had to make sure, and that's why I put those dots up at the top, just like I did up here. Also, if you think about our place value chart and 20,000s, if we had our thousands here and I put 20 in here, I have to unsmush them. I don't unsmush and keep the 2 in the thousands and move the 0 back to the hundreds. I move the 2 to the 10,000s and keep my 0 here in the thousands, giving me 20,000. 100,000. For our next problem, they've added a little twist because they've kept this number the same, but they've made our second factor a little bit bigger. So we already know what this one is going to round to easiest, which would be 5,000. But now we have 420. So that should round to, not to the nearest 10, that's already rounded to the nearest 10, but to the nearest 100. I would put 400 here, 500 at the top, and my midpoint would be 450. 420 is smaller, so it would round down to 400. So again, we're keeping that same basic fact, 20, and then we're remembering that when we're adding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros, we're not going to count this one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So ones, tens, hundreds, comma, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000. So we end up with 2 million as our answer. Okay, let's move on to some more challenging ones. We have 1,320 times 88. So if I asked you to round that to the nearest 100, you would end up with 1,300 or 1,300. And rounding this one to the nearest 10, which is all you can do, it's going to round to 90. Now, some people may look at 13 times 9 and say, I can't do that one in my head. And to be honest, I'm not great with mental math. That wouldn't be something that I would round to in my head either. So you don't have to, but there may be some people in your class or some people who may see that problem and be totally capable of it. So what we could do is then go up to the next number. So if we can't round it to the nearest 100, let's round it to the nearest 1,000, which would round to 1,000. And this one would still round to 90. So we end up with 9, because our basic fact is 9 times 1. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. So we end up with 90,000. If we were doing this in unit form, it would be 1,000. And it would be 9 tens. And we end up with 9 10,000s. That's all I have for you guys today. On your problem set, make sure you're searching and rounding correctly, but searching for those basic facts to make this problem set as easy as possible. Thanks, guys. I'll see you again soon.